It sensed them coming, gaining, and its fear grew. Perhaps it was not eternal after all. The unthinkable must finally be thought. Worse, it had sensed the death of its young. A third of these hated, hateful men boys was walking steadily up its trail of birth, almost insane with revulsion, but continuing nonetheless, methodically stamping out the life from each of its eggs. "No!" it wailed, lurching from side to side, feeling its life force running from 100 wounds, none of them mortal in itself, but each a song of pain, each slowing it. One of its legs hung by a single living twist of meat. One of its eyes was blind. It sensed a terrible rupture inside, the result of whatever poison one of the hated men boys had managed to shoot down its throat. And still they came on, closing the distance. And how could this happen? It whined and mewed, and when it sensed them almost directly behind, it did the only thing it could do now. It turned to fight. Bill and Richie saw it turn toward them, its mandibles opening and closing, its one good eye glaring down at them. And Bill realized it gave off its own source of illumination, like some grisly lightning bug, but the light was flickering and uncertain. It was hurt badly. Its thoughts buzzed and racketed. "Let me go! Let me go and you can have everything you ever wanted! Money, fame, fortune, power. I can give you these things." In his head, Bill moved forward empty-handed, his eyes fixed on its single red one. He felt the power growing inside him, investing him, knotting his arms into cords, filling each clenched fist with its own force. Richie walked beside him, his lips pulled back over his teeth. "I can give you your wife back. I can do it. Only I. She'll remember nothing, just as the 7 of you remembered nothing." They were close now. Very close. Bill could smell its stinking aroma and realized with a sudden horror that it was the smell of the Barrens, the smell they had taken for the smell of sewers and polluted streams and the burning dump. But had they ever really believed those were all it had been? It was the smell of it, and perhaps it had been the strongest in the Barrens, but it had hung over all of Derry like a cloud, and people just didn't smell it, the way zookeepers don't smell their charges after a while, or even wonder why the visitors wrinkle their noses when they come in. "Us too," he muttered to Richie, and Richie nodded without taking his eyes off the spider, which now shrank back from them, its abominable spiny legs clittering, brought to bay at last. "I can't give you eternal life, but I can touch you and you will live long, long lives. 200 years, 300, perhaps 500. I can make you gods of the earth if you let me go, if you let me go, if you let me." "Bill," Richie asked hoarsely, with a scream building in him, building up and up and up. Bill charged. Richie ran with him stride for stride. They struck together with their right fist, but Bill understood it was not really their fist they were striking with at all. It was their combined force, augmented by the force of that other. It was the force of memory and desire. Above all else, it was the force of love and unforgotten childhood, like one big wheel. The spider's shriek filled Bill's head, seeming to splinter his brains. He felt his fist plunge deep into writhing wetness. His arm followed it in up to the shoulder. He pulled it back, dripping with the spider's black blood. Ichor poured from the hole he had made. He saw Richie standing almost beneath its bloated body, covered with its darkly sparkling blood, standing in the classic boxer stance, his dripping fist pumping. The spider lashed at them with its legs. Bill felt one of them rip down his side, parting his shirt, parting skin. Its stinger pumped uselessly against the floor. Its screams were clarion bells in his head. It lunged clumsily forward, trying to bite him. Instead of retreating, Bill drove forward, using not just his fist now, but his whole body, making himself into a torpedo. He ran into its gut, like a sprinting fullback who lowers his shoulders and simply drives straight ahead. For a moment he felt its stinking flesh simply give, as if it would rebound and send him flying. With an inarticulate scream, he drove harder, pushing forward and upward with his legs, digging at it with his hands, and he broke through, was inundated with its hot fluids. They ran across his face, in his ears. He snuffled them up his nose in thin, squirming streams. He was in the black again, up to his shoulders inside its convulsing body, and in his clogged ears, he could hear a sound like the steady whack, whack, whack of a big bass drum, the one that leads the parade when the circus comes to town, with its complement of freaks and strutting, capering clowns, the sound of its heart. He heard Richie scream in sudden pain, a sound that rose into a quick, gasping moan and was cut off. Bill suddenly thrust both fisted hands forward. He was choking, strangling in its pulsing bag of guts and waters. Whack, whack, whack. He plunged his hands into it, ripping, tearing, parting, seeking the source of the sound, rupturing organs, his slimed fingers opening and closing, his locked chest seeming to swell from lack of air. Whack, 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 and suddenly it was in his hands, a great living thing that pumped and pulsed against his palms, pushing them back and forth. No, 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 no! Yes! Bill cried, choking, drowning. Yes! Try this, you bitch! Try this one out! Do you like it? Do you? Do you love it? Do you? He laced his fingers together over the pulsing narthex of its heart, palms spreading apart in an inverted V. He brought them together with all the force he could muster. There was one final shriek of pain and fear as its heart exploded between his hands, running out between his fingers in jittering strings. Whack, whack, whack. The scream fading, dwindling. Bill felt his body clench around him suddenly, like a fist in a slick glove. Then everything loosened. He became aware that his body was tilting, slipping slowly off to one side. At the same time, he began pulling back, his consciousness leaving him. The spider collapsed on its side, a huge bundle of steaming alien meat, its legs still quivering and jerking, caressing the sides of the tunnel and scraping across the floor in random scrawls. Bill staggered away, breathing in whooping gasps, spitting in the effort to clear his mouth of its horrible taste. He tripped over his own feet and fell to his knees, and clearly he heard the voice of the other. The turtle might be dead, but whatever had invested it was not. Son, you did real good. Then it was gone. The power went with it. He felt weak, revulsed, half insane. He looked over his shoulder and saw the dying black nightmare of the spider, still jerking and quivering. Richie! He cried out in a hoarse, breaking voice. Richie, where are you, man? No answer. The light was gone now. It had died with the spider. He fumbled in the pocket of his matted shirt for the last book of matches. There they were, but they wouldn't light. The heads were soaked with blood. Richie! He screamed again, beginning to weep now. He began to crawl forward, first one hand and then the other, groping in the dark. At last, one of them struck something which yielded limply to his touch. His hands flew over it and stopped as they touched Richie's face. Richie! Richie! Still no answer. Struggling in the dark, Bill got one arm under Richie's back and the other under his knees. He wobbled to his feet and began to stumble back the way they had come, with Richie in his arms.